Most people think recovery means stopping, removing the substance and holding the line. That's the model we've been given for decades. But Chapter 9, that's what we're starting just now, challenges that directly. Well, don't forget our disclaimer though. Because abstinence alone doesn't guarantee freedom. People can quit and still be trapped by craving, by identity, by systems that keep them defined as in recovery forever. That looks like healing, but quietly become another form of control. So the chapter reframes recovery completely, not as absence, but as autonomy, not as obedience, but as awareness. The focus shifts from how do we stop to how do we live, rebuilding connection, rhythm and meaning in everyday life. Across communities, gardens, music, shared spaces, people don't just remove substances, they replace isolation with participation. That's where change stabilises, not in restriction, but in relationship. Key idea is simple but uncomfortable. Addiction isn't just chemical, it's ecological and social. And recovery isn't a destination, it's a way of being, a daily practice of awareness, choice, connection. So if stopping isn't the same as being free, what actually is? Drugs and Addiction, an Anarchist Perspective, Dickie Dredd. This is part 64 in the video series. We're moving on today to Chapter 9, Beyond Abstinence. So, this is... part 60. So, Chapter 9, Beyond Abstinence, part 65. Redefining recovery from abstinence to autonomy. Recovery, like religion, has acquired its own dogma. The abstinence model, shaped by mid-century psychiatry and refined through self-help orthodoxy, preaches deliverance through denial. Its hymn is one day at a time. Its relic, the chip for good behaviour. As discussed in section 49, that faith carried compassion, but also control. The sinner was reborn as patient, yet still told to kneel. The moral architecture of medicine survived beneath a secular surface. The addict was no longer evil, merely defective, but still required supervision. This transformation mirrored what Stats called the myth of mental illness, a shift from sim to symptom that left autonomy intact. The body replaced the soul as battleground. The doctor replaced the priest. In both cases, salvation meant surrender. Anarchist medicine begins elsewhere. Healing may not depend on abstinence, but on awareness. The goal is not to flee sensation, but to understand it, what Marte calls attention meeting pain. The person who learns to sit with craving, to trace its rhythm and meaning, may be freer than one who builds a fortress against it. Abstinence for many is survival, autonomy is evolution. Across the framework of this book, examples repeat the lesson. In community gardens and festival kitchens, people who once relied on chemicals to find focus now find it in soil, music and motion. A sound system crew that replaced the dawn pill with drumming did not lose the rhythm, it simply changed the instrument. Freedom, as Carr observed, lies in removing the illusion of need rather than the substance itself. To quit believing that a thing controls you is a deeper liberation than merely locking it away. Addiction's chemistry may be real, but its hold is maintained by narrative. Rewriting that story becomes the first act of recovery. The abstinence model mistakes control for freedom. Its logic echoes the disciplinary psychology traced by Foucault, self-mastery as social obedience. Programs that demand lifetime identification, once an addict, always an addict, reproduce the same identity they claim to heal. In that circular confession, the subject is never allowed to graduate. Recovery becomes a career. By contrast, autonomy treats relapse not as failure, but as feedback. Each slip reveals where belonging is missing. The body learns again to improvise rather than submit. Across Europe, new frameworks reflect this shift. Portugal's decriminalisation policy treats drug use as a public health issue rather than a moral one, focuses on reintegration rather than punishment. The results, lower mortality, reduced HIV transmission, and higher treatment engagement, illustrate what Nutt calls harm realism, the idea that evidence, not fear, should govern response. Where shame decreases, recovery increases. Healing flourishes in permission, not prohibition. Community recovery networks embody this ethos daily. Some maintain partial abstinence on no opiates, but an occasional spliff. Others replace ritual intoxication with shared ceremony, breathwork, dance, fire circles, long walks that turn talk into therapy. These are not failures of will, but negotiations of balance. The measure of success is not purity, but participation, how fully one returns to relationship. It echoes what Section 64 described as the art of coming down. Integration as continuation, not conclusion. Each act of care rehearses freedom in miniature. The contrast with institutional treatment remains stark. Clinics still frame recovery as compliance, counting clean days like prison sentences. But healing measured in obedience only reproduces the hierarchy that caused the harm. True recovery is rhythmic, not linear. It allows the nervous system to remember joy without guilt. As Rose noted, neoliberal medicine rebrands control as care, demanding that the citizen manage their health as labour. Anarchist recovery subverts this by treating well-being as relationship, not productivity. Language must evolve alongside practice, as we talked about in the last chapter. To speak of being clean after quitting implies that one was dirty before. To call someone in recovery forever is to freeze them at the start line. Section 64 showed that linguistic liberation is the precondition for social change. When speech ceases to shame, behaviour can change without coercion. A person can be recovered, even while still navigating risk, because recovery, properly understood, means capacity, not conformity. Evidence now supports this broader view. Alexander demonstrated that social connection, not pharmacology, predicts sustained recovery. Autonomy nourishes the same chemistry that abstinence denies. Dopamine from trust, oxytocin from rhythm, serotonin from community. Healing therefore becomes ecological rather than individual. As earlier sections explored, rhythm and labour ground the chemistry in body and earth. Every garden, every workshop, every dance floor is a small laboratory of autonomy. To redefine recovery is to rewrite responsibility. The question shifts from how do we stop to how do we live. Abstinence may mark a beginning, but autonomy sustains the journey. Where institutions seek compliance, communities cultivate capacity. The addict ceases to be patient and becomes participant, shaping their environment as it shapes them. Freedom ceases to be an idea and becomes a habit, repeated daily, quietly, like breath. Recovery is therefore not destination, but disposition, curiosity without self-destruction, awareness without autonomy. To wait clear-headed and still wonder what the day might taste like. That modest revolution, choosing understanding over avoidance, marks the passage from abstinence to autonomy. Recovery was never about substance. It's about control, who has it and how it's maintained. Which means a model built on abstinence alone doesn't free people, it just replaces one form of control with another. So if stopping isn't the same as being free, what are we actually aiming for? And if we've mistaken control for recovery this whole time, what else have we misunderstood? So next up, we're still on Chapter 9, Beyond Abstinence, and we move to Section 66, Embodied Freedom, Care of the Self as Practice. And once again, please go back and look at the disclaimer, because I wouldn't want anyone to break abstinence, because it can be a lifesaver. You need to understand the rest of the book and everything about yourself and your relationship with others before you break abstinence. So do not do it if you've got any doubts.